Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a rare item collector wins a valuable antique at an auction that has ties to the spiritual world. So, no matter what you do, please don't finish the 3,000-piece chimeric challenge puzzle.
I'm what's called a set collector. I find and restore sets of vintage auctionables and sell them as complete sets for high-end clients. I originally came out to Lewisburg to put a bid on a near-complete set of original The Phantom comics. The collection was about a dozen short, but none of the missing issues were that rare. It was a slam dunk. It might take some time to get them graded, but if I could find a serious buyer, that wouldn't be a problem. I won the bid and was ready to call it a day when they announced a surprise item. These are always good. A complete 1923 Chimeric Challenger. 3,000-piece puzzle. Holy shit. For those not in the know, the Chimeric Challenger is famously misprinted. They were discontinued because the cutting machine had some kind of malfunction. Some pieces were stuck together and had to be cut with scissors to be assembled. Others were just plain wood, completely missing the print. Some had entire segments missing from the box. It was a commercial failure, specifically because there were seemingly no complete sets. So to have a complete 3,000-piece Chimeric Challenger, their largest and final creation, that's big money. I got it for $2,600. I've seen incomplete sets go for about $8,000, so I could probably get past $15,000 if I could find the right collector. The only problem was that while the previous owner insisted that it was complete, there was no certificate. So I would have to put it together just to verify. Honestly, I was way more excited about the Chimeric Challenger than my Phantom set. It was good money, but this was unique, rare, an actual challenge to put together and put into the hands of the right person. I got back home. I was greeted by my wall of collectibles, amassed from years of digging through countless yard sales and storage units. My crowning achievement was a vintage Mickey Mouse pocket watch placed under a little glass dome, lit with a mild yellow RGB light. The thing wasn't that rare or expensive, but it was special to me. It was the exact watch my mom hadn't been able to afford me for my 6th birthday. It represented everything I'd grown into. Someone who found things. Someone with the confidence and means to get what I want. I pulled a half-nighter finding the missing Phantom issues. By 4 a.m., I'd found all but 2, and those were just standard issues from the 80s. A bit tricky to find a seller, but dirt cheap. I just had to find the right shop, and yet I could barely get any sleep. I was so excited to get started with the Chimeric Challenger. I put out my white cotton gloves, set my alarm for 8, and put a timer on my coffee maker. As soon as that bell rang, I'd shoot out of bed like a boxer ready for round 1. As I closed my eyes that night, a single thought itched to the back of my mind. I didn't have the slightest idea what was printed on the puzzle. After a few hours of twisting and turning, I was finally standing next to the box with a steaming cup of coffee ready to go. I put on my headset and gave my West Coast guy, Lenny, a call. He was usually up at night, chatting with some of his East Asian clients. He picked up on the first signal.
What you got?
"Got," he answered. "You know any puzzle people, Lenny?" I asked. "High-end."
Are we talking Rachel Page stuff, collector shit, curios?
"Curios?" "I sent you a picture." The Chimeric Challenger came in a plain wooden box with a simple company logo on the side. The logo, a sunflower print, had faded to a shade of gray, a far cry from the original azure blue.
You Challenger?
Challenger?
He asked.
How many missing?
How many missing?
Shut up.
Shut up.
No.
No.
"Yeah, and check this out." I sent him another picture. This time of the side of the box, where you could kind of tell the number 3,000 from the remaining print. Again, faded to a gray.
And you're telling me you got a full set? 3,000 pieces?
3,000 pieces.
You got it verified?
You got it verified?
Gonna put it together, I sighed. But yeah, it's a...
You haven't checked it?
You haven't checked it?
Look, you can't throw around complete set before you get it verified. These things are notorious.
These are notorious.
I'm asking you to keep your beady weasel eyes open.
I'll call you a dumbass for not verifying it if that's what you want.
If that's what you want.
serious. This is big league collector stuff. Minnesota.
And if you get it verified, I'll shower you with roses.
You with roses.
Lenny hung up and I got to work. I took pictures of the box in every angle, noting the company address on the bottom right. Tomskog, Minnesota. Original print. I put on my cotton gloves and carefully opened the box. There were 30 identical plastic bags inside, each numbered to contain 100 pieces. Unfortunately, the seal was already broken. That probably set me back a couple of thousands. I photographed everything and opened the first bag. I went through all the pieces slowly and carefully. I double-checked them for bad prints and weak tabs. Putting it together would be the last thing I did. It took me roughly 4 hours to get to the 1,000 piece mark. So far, so good. I hadn't put the pieces together yet, but I saw some rough shades of blue, black, white skin, and a hammer. I got the impression that it was a portrait, possibly of a worker. Maybe a factory worker? I could see something rough and metallic, possibly a printing press. I saw some kind of denim texture. I spent all day checking the rest of the pieces, sending updates to Lenny along the way. The thing was pristine. Not a single wobbly tab or weak print. These pieces had probably never been properly assembled. By 9 p.m., I was completely done. Every piece checked, verified, and returned to their plastic bags. They were all perfect. Well, as perfect as a 100-year-old puzzle could be. Now I just had to put it together to make sure there were no misprints in context. There could be some kind of mix-up that I'd missed. By the end of the night, Lenny told me he had a potential buyer. They were only interested in a complete set, so I had to put it together to make sure. But if it was legit, we were looking at an $18,000 to $19,000 payout, plus commission fees. The next day, I ordered the final issues of The Phantom and got ready to put the puzzle together. I put on an audiobook, uploaded all my pictures from the previous day, and got to work. Now, putting together a 3,000-piece puzzle takes time. If I spent all day working on it, about 12 hours, it'd still take me several days to finish. Probably another day since I had to be careful about the pieces. So I cracked my knuckles, turned off all notifications, and zoned out. Around lunchtime, I'd put together a few edge pieces and a dozen pieces showing a hand holding a hammer. A dirty, labor-roughened hand with black nails and deep blue bruises around the knuckles. I took a short break. I covered the pieces with a cotton cloth and made myself a sandwich. The Phantom collection was basically complete. So I put some feelers out looking for a buyer. I found the final issues and placed an order. Most of the time, my collections don't come to me complete. The Chimeric Challenger was a bit different that way. Usually I had to track down missing pieces or incomplete sets. That was part of the job. Having it served to me like this felt like cheating. As I got back to the puzzle, I got the sense that something was different. I removed the flowery cotton cover, taking in the smell of the old wood. I could have sworn I'd only put 12 pieces together for the arm. And yet, there were 13 connected pieces. Strange. When you solve puzzles, you start with the edges. That was my strategy too, but I couldn't keep myself from assembling whatever random pieces I found along the way. Mostly background pieces showing parts of shelves and metal flooring. Long after the sun had set, I tore myself away from the puzzle. I put the cotton cover back, chugged a Red Bull, and double-checked my socials. I had a lot of missed calls. Missed calls are often missed opportunities. I couldn't afford those, but this had to get done. I spent another few hours rifling through offers, tips, and various rumors. Apparently, there'd been some talk about the Chimeric Challenger. Maybe Lenny asking around stirred something up. I went through every post about it. The consensus was clear. There were no complete Chimeric Challenger sets. A few of them had managed to put together complete sets by combining boxes, but that only worked for the 100 and 500-piece sets. The 3,000-piece sets were all unique, one poster said. That's why they didn't spoil the picture on the box. It was a collector's item. I was just about to click on a link when I heard a sound. It sounded like a click, but it didn't come from my mouse. Instead, I looked over at the covered puzzle. I walked over to it, scratching my eyes. I just stood there, looking at the flowery print of the cotton cover. Had I really heard something, or was it just sleep deprivation? Even if I'd heard something, what made me think it came from the puzzle? But no. I wasn't that person anymore. I was confident. I got what I wanted. I removed the cover and counted the assembled pieces. Edges looked fine. No problem there. But the hand with the hammer? 14 pieces, not 13. I counted, recounted, and recounted again. Had it been 14 all along? I hadn't written 13 anywhere, and I was starting to doubt myself. Puzzles don't assemble themselves. I counted the pieces so many times that the image of that hand holding the hammer burned into my eyes. I wiped the sweat from my brow, reminding myself to put on clean cotton gloves the next day. "It's 14, I said out loud, putting it down on a post-it. "It is 14 pieces. Not 13, it was 14. I covered it back up. That night I slept like a rock. I dreamt about laborers, people with shovels, hammers, saws, and chisels. I dreamt about a hazy workshop full of acidic compounds, people yelling back and forth, a large man with an anchor tattooed on his forearm, a 12-year-old with a bucket, handing out cups of water poured from a hand-carved wooden ladle, the smell of oil, tar, and something sweet, a flour press making a potent dye. The workers all had blue hands, all of them, all except the foreman. He wielded a hammer. Something clicked. I woke up. I'd only been asleep for an hour, but I was shaking and wide awake. I tried going back to sleep, but there was a struggle in the back of my head. Part of me was telling me to stop being an idiot. Part of me wanted to go back to count. It had been 12 pieces. Then it was 13, then 14. It had been 13, I had to stop doubting myself. I cursed out loud and got up. This was the final time. I stomped up to the table, removed the cover, and counted. I didn't even bother to check the edge pieces. 16. There were 2 more pieces assembled, completing the hammer. I leaned back in my chair, looking at the post-it note. It clearly said 14. There was no doubt anymore. There were more pieces assembled now than earlier that night. But what the hell did that mean? I put the cloth back over the puzzle and just watched it. I must have sat there over an hour, nodding in and out of a restless sleep. At one point, I didn't know if I was awake or not. My eyes were open, but I didn't really register anything I was seeing. And there, in that dreamlike moment, I saw something move under the cotton cover, followed by another wooden click. I must have fallen asleep as I woke up hours later, still sitting in my chair. I had some missed calls, a few items that had to be sent, and a few phantom issues to pick up at the post office. And yet, I felt uneasy leaving the chimeric challenger. I tried telling myself I'd imagined it, but I couldn't fool myself. Instead, I put my hand on the cotton cloth and took a deep breath. I didn't want to know. I didn't want to count them. I didn't want there to be more. Just as I steeled myself, my phone rang. Lenny. I breathed a sigh of relief. Saved by the bell.
If this is legit, we're looking at a paycheck. Not table scraps. A fat double quarter-pounder paycheck. I can't find a single person with a complete 3,000-piece set.
Single person with a complete 3,000-piece set.
You telling...
Imagine big brown sacks with dollar signs on them and the satisfaction of proving me wrong, but you gotta verify it.
And of proving me wrong. But you gotta verify it.
Get on it.
You know it. I'll send you a
Big dollar signs like you're a cartoon villain robbing a bank.
Like you're a cartoon villain robbing a bank.
They get to work.
clear picture, Lenny. Thank you.
Get to work.
I looked up at my Mickey Mouse pocket watch. I'd earned it. I'd been sure of myself, and I made it work. This would be no different. It took me about 2 hours to finish up my chores, sent out a couple of surplus items, picked up a few of the Phantom comics, downed a box of gas station sushi, and got back home. I substituted my audiobook for rock and roll and got into the vibe. I didn't even count the pieces, I just started putting them together, sorting them by color, mouthing the words to Detroit Rock City while looking for matching boot pieces. This was work, that's all that mattered. The guy in the picture had his labor, I had mine. I kept taking progress pics to send to Lenny later. This would be another full day. I stopped for a dinner break at about 6 p.m. I heated up some canned ravioli and reviewed the pictures. It was fun just to see how far I'd come. I'd finished the entire frame and started working my way in. I'd gotten a large chunk of metal flooring in, connected to a large segment of background wall. At least 600 pieces, all in all. Then I noticed something. I went back and forth between my pictures. I tried arranging them, putting one over the other, making sure they were the same size. I couldn't get the arm to overlay. All the other pieces were fine, but not the arm with the hammer. It was as if it wasn't in the same angle from one picture to the next, as if it had moved. I looked over at the flowery cloth, feeling that icy block of doubt sink back into my stomach. Without all the music, without the bravado, it was just me and this mystery. One by one, I sent the progress pics to Lenny. And as I hit send on the last one,
I got the guy.
Lenny, I started. You gotta...
The guy.
What?
The guy, a client, he's interested.
Okay, sure, but...
No, you don't understand. He's on the other line. He wants to talk.
Now?
You need a second?
Lenny, there's an issue.
Is this gonna keep us from making bank?
I took a deep breath. I wasn't sure I couldn't be. No, I don't think so.
Then you're on in 5.
There was an electronic tone, followed by 2 signals. All of a sudden, Lenny was off the line. There was a stranger on the other end. A stranger with an old, wheezing voice. I sat there, listening to him breathe for a few seconds. Clearly, a smoker.
You got the full set?
He asked. I think so, yeah. Putting it together as we speak.
Don't do that.
There was an urgency. Like he'd waited for just the right time to say it. Preparing himself. It was the clearest thing he'd said so far.
Don't do it.
He repeated.
Tear it apart.
Why would I do that?
Can't you feel it?
I looked back at the flowery cloth. Had it really moved the other night? Had the picture changed? 12 pieces. 13, 14, 16. I hadn't even counted them since. 2 dozen? 3?
They are incomplete by design, by necessity. It shouldn't be complete.
Maybe it isn't.
Make sure of it. Disassemble it, separate the pieces, and never look at it again.
I can't just... I got up from my chair, seeing the setting sun bounce off the glass dome protecting the Mickey Mouse pocket watch. I wanted this, and I was going to get it. If you want to take it off my hands, I'm sure Lenny will get you a fair price, I sighed. But if you excuse me, I got work to do.
Don't do this.
I hung up, and for the rest of the night, I didn't bother counting. I called it a day just past midnight. I face-planted into bed, leaving the playlist rolling. I'd just catch a few hours of sleep, then get back to it. I wasn't going to drag this out. This was business, and I was going to handle it. But I couldn't help myself from dreaming. Maybe the fumes from the box got to me. Maybe it was just a different, intrusive headspace. Either way, I imagined myself back in that hazy workshop. I imagined myself waking up. A man with blue hands shaking my shoulder. Our lunch break was over, and I was slacking off. I had this mind-numbing task of putting the same varnish on wooden boxes over and over and over. The smell was so strong that I couldn't even feel it anymore. There was a noise further down the hall. A hammer coming down again and again. Screams, pleading, flesh. We knew better than to stop. You didn't quit this job. No one did. I woke up to a sudden clatter, something falling onto the floor. My eyes shot open. There were puzzle pieces scattered across the carpet. And a bloody hammer. Specks of blood covered the flowery cotton cover. The hammer just lay there on the floor, clear as day. A few puzzle pieces had fallen off the table. I picked up the hammer, feeling the weight of it in my hand. A sticky handle covered in loose strands of hair. I pulled the cotton cover aside. The chimeric challenger was almost complete. The puzzle revealed a man in denim overalls, covered in cuts, bruises, and scars. The only thing missing was his head, that hadn't been put together yet. He didn't have a hammer in his hand anymore. He did, however, have colored hands. But they weren't blue like the workers I'd dreamt of. They were blood red. I'd forgotten to turn notifications back on. I had hundreds. Row after row of texts from the same number, over and over. All of them telling me to please destroy the puzzle. Burn it. Throw it away. Tear the pieces apart and just walk away. Missed calls. Offers to pay me to get rid of it. Calls from Lenny. Calls from unknown numbers. Pleading, desperate messages. The last message was sent just minutes before I woke up, asking me to please save his life. For his children's sake. For his grandchildren. And finally, an email from Lenny. No wonder he wants it that bad, Lenny wrote. He's a Tomskog native. His dad probably helped make the thing. My pulse raced. I held the bloody hammer in my hand. This was real. This wasn't a trick of the mind. There were only about 40 pieces left to assemble. No one quits the job. Enough. I picked it all up and showed it into the box, abandoning all care and common sense. I showed it all in there, bending the tabs and snapping the corners. I saw the pieces bend and break, hearing the wood snap. I forced the lid shut, put it under my arm, and left. I was going to burn it in the yard, but it was snowing outside. I decided to throw it off a bridge instead. There's this bridge not too far from where I live where the water never really freezes. I drove up there, parked, and got out. I brought the hammer. I put the puzzle down and just started smashing it with the hammer. I watched a flock of red birds take flight, frightened by the sudden noise. Finally, I heaved it all over the edge, watching the broken wooden pieces plop into the river. As the pieces sailed into the rushing water, I felt this immense sense of relief. And with that, I dropped the hammer into the river as well. The color from the broken puzzle pieces had given my hands a faint sheen of blue. I used some snow to scrub it off. I texted Lenny, telling him the puzzle was incomplete. I didn't even bother to check his response. I'd wasted so much time and money on this, but I still felt like I'd dodged a bullet, like I'd been on the cusp of something terrible. I headed home. I spent the rest of the day trying to find a buyer for the Phantom collection. I'd gained the attention of a few big names. Apparently, the rumor of me having a chimeric challenger had also gotten out. There were quite a few messages about it. I made up a copy-paste response to get rid of them. I tried my best just to get back to work, ignoring the puzzle and everything about it. I didn't want to know what had happened. I didn't want to think about it. And yet, I could still see some blue powder under my fingernails. That night, just before bed, I scrubbed myself clean. But no matter how hard I scrubbed my hands, I could still see little blue stains on my skin. Maybe it wasn't really there. That night, I could barely sleep at all. I fell in and out of consciousness, as if my body was keeping me awake. And still, I caught some snippets of another life. A life that also had blue powder on its hands at one point. I imagined people putting down their tools. Someone getting beaten to death for insubordination. The 12-year-old boy putting down his bucket of water. Finally, a hammer raised even at him. Then, a gunshot. My eyes were wide open. I sat up, letting my legs fall off the edge of the bed. I dug my toes into the carpet. I tried to calm down, to let myself rest. Then I felt something brush against my toe. Something at the edge of the carpet. A puzzle piece. It must have bounced off when the pieces fell off the table. It depicted the top of a bald man's head, with a gunshot wound in the forehead. The eyes in the puzzle piece turned to me, meeting my gaze. Glass shattered, footsteps. I hurried into my closet, hiding behind my collection of robes. I heard uneven footsteps fumble their way inside. Water dripping onto the hardwood floor in the hallway. Something metallic brushing against the wall. It was dark, but I could see the outline of it as it stepped into my bedroom. A body, broken. A man with every bone twisted by hammer blows. A wheezing, rattling breath from a vibrating tongue. The top of his head was missing. The man from the puzzle. The chimeric challenger. I held his puzzle piece in my hand. He used his hammer as a cane for the blind, feeling his way forward, brushing it against the walls. As soon as he found the bed where I'd slept, he lost his composure. He made this unearthly sound, ripping the covers and pillows into pieces, waving the hammer around with his broken limbs. He could barely stand on his ruined legs. Every step, every swing was agony. I could hear the rage and frustration bubbling up from his exposed throat, the hammer bringing down paintings, pictures, shelves, and my priceless collectible. All of a sudden, the doors to the closet were ripped from the hinges, broken fingers wrapped around my throat. I held up the final puzzle piece like a shield, hoping it would all just go away. "Take it!" I screamed. "Just fucking take it!" But there was no discussion, no thought. He just started beating me to death with that goddamn hammer. That first blow connected with my jaw, breaking it. The second hit fractured my right upper arm. It was so fast that I didn't even understand what was happening. The third hit connected with my shoulder. I didn't even realize I'd dropped the puzzle piece. The dark turned red, and for a moment I could feel the texture of metal flooring against my cheek. I could see the haze of the workshop. I'd tried to quit. The foreman wasn't having it. Fingers grabbing the roots of my hair, more hammer blows, my forehead burning, my head ringing, my world started spinning as my inner ear gave up. Another blow, another. I tried pleading for help, but I couldn't form words through my broken jaw. Instead, I just lay there, wheezing, just like the foreman. All of a sudden, it stopped. A hammer clattered to the ground. I saw the glass dome with my Mickey Mouse pocket watch. It was still intact, resting on my bed. I wanted this. I wanted to live. I grabbed the hammer, flipped it, and used it to drag myself across the floor. I kept losing my grip from the bleeding. But I made it. Months of physical therapy. Dozens of surgeries. And I still can't lift my arm over my head. When I stretch one way, I can feel this deep ache still lingering in my jaw. Turns out he accidentally smashed the final puzzle piece when he tried to beat me to death. I guess in a strange way, he destroyed himself. Now, I still see people looking to complete sets of the Chimeric Challenge puzzles. There are 8 auctions for various pieces going on right now. Some for 300 pieces, one looking to complete a set for a 1,000-piece puzzle. And that's why I'm asking that we please, as a community, never talk of these again.
Hello and welcome to Daytime, your place for scary stories, straight from the horror forums of Reddit. Make sure to like and subscribe for more horror tales of things that go bumping the night. On tonight's episode, a man gets a test DNA kit for his birthday, discovers that someone in his family gave him a rare condition. So, would you believe? I got an invitation with my DNA test.
For my 31st birthday, my friends got me a heritage DNA test. One of those where you send a sample and get an approximate percentage of what makes up your background. I don't think there was anything in particular that made them gift it to me, though. I think they ordered one for themselves. Got a 2-for-1 kind of deal. But still, I figured it'd be fun to check out. My biological grandpa died when my dad was very young, and my grandmother remarried long before I was born. So I was never told a lot about that side of the family. I'd always been a bit of a sickly child, so I've been wary about looking too closely at my family and health history. But I figured this couldn't hurt, so I filled out the form, provided the sample, and sent it on its way. Then I just sort of forgot about it. When I finally got the results, it came with a few surprising revelations. While the majority of my heritage was entirely predictable, there was an 11% splash of something called the Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill Tribe. I asked my parents about it. While my mother had no idea what the Blue Hill Tribe was, she was pretty sure it wasn't from her side of the family. My dad was equally confused. Sure, he didn't know much about his biological father, but he knew for a fact that the man was from Oklahoma. His mom, on the other hand, was Minnesotan. Dad got curious and ordered his own test within the hour. As I ended the call and boxed the packaging up, something fell out. A sturdy envelope made of thin navy blue cardboard and sealed with a sunflower emblem. It had a mild chemical smell to it, like a sweet ammonia. At first I thought it was going to be some kind of special offer, much like what got me that test in the first place. But after turning it over, I could see it was addressed directly to me in handwritten cursive that read, "Dear Daniel, congratulations on your recent result. As part of our further effort to explore the diverse world of unified heritage, and in cooperation with our various multinational partners, we would like to extend an invite to descendants of the for an eventful day of education, connectivity, and celebration. Please consider this invitation and review the enclosed details at personal link using your login credentials. We hope to see you there." I didn't know exactly what to make of it, but I decided to check it out. And holy hell, it reeked of scam. Here's what it offered. A fully paid 3-day stay at a hotel in Manchester, New Hampshire. Free entry to the company-sponsored Heritage Celebration event, alongside other members of both the Blue Hill Tribe, but also other unique and diverse backgrounds. There were several groups listed, mostly hailing from the Scans, the Carpathians, and the Ural Mountains. I would have to pay for the trip to get there, though, and they were clear about food, drink, and room service not being included, but all in all, it sounded too good to be true. After several hours of trying to find my way through customer service websites, I finally got a hold of an actual service rep over the phone. At first, they seemed to have no idea what I was talking about. But when I referenced a personal case number at the bottom of the envelope, they referred me to a special events manager. This manager, in turn, confirmed everything.
I know.
They laughed.
I know how it sounds, but this is actually a sort of golden ticket thing. It's a biennial event and part of a charity effort, so there's a tax incentive for us as well. If you can make it, I'd recommend checking it out. We got some event photos on our website for reference.
I did as she suggested, and I gotta say, I was convinced. I accepted. My flight arrived on the morning of the first event day, about 3 hours ahead of opening. I had an uneventful early check-in, spotting the locked doors through the lobby. There were a few posters marking the Heritage Celebration event, and there were already a couple of people roaming the halls outside, but I decided to catch my breath a bit before the doors opened. I got to my room and clocked out for a couple of hours. I double-checked the event schedule on my phone, making mental notes of the various talks, guided tours, luncheons, dinners, and get-togethers. It was a full 2-day event. I was surprised at just how much there was to do, considering the event was intended for no more than a couple of hundred people at most. Still, I couldn't complain. But just as I drifted off for a nap, I got a notification on my phone, a text from my dad. Apparently, he'd recently gotten his results back. Strangely enough, he didn't have any percentage of the Northern Scandinavian Blue Hill tribe in his genetic makeup. Maybe my mom wasn't as Southern as she thought. Once the doors opened, there were about 100 people walking about. Some looked like average Joe Nobodies. Others were clearly some kind of corporate representative. I could tell at least 6 different accents, just by walking around, and a couple of foreign languages. There were a few booths to check out, mostly advertising various new services and products by the company behind the DNA test, but also one that was just information about various forgotten or unusual tribes. Going through the pamphlets, I couldn't find one about the Blue Hill tribe, so I decided to ask the service rep behind the counter.
Blue Hill?
He said, raising an eyebrow. I'm not sure. Another rep whispered something in his ear, and he nodded.
Right.
He corrected.
We don't have any reading material on that subject, but I think there's an info session. Should be part of the Tribes of the North meetup.
I double-checked the schedule again and made my way to a couple of events. The Tribes of the North meetup was an after-dinner event, part of the late-night off-hours socializing thing they tried to get going. I spent the afternoon listening in on various other topics, trying to pass the time. There was a speaker on the topic of nomadic North American tribes, as well as a workshop about forgotten languages. It was all interesting in its own way. But I found myself drifting away just after lunchtime. I had to take a rest around 3 p.m. because of an upset stomach, a relic from my sickly past. Later, I took a walk around town and had a decent meal at a local restaurant before I headed back to the hotel. I was a few minutes late to the meetup. There were about 24 people there in total. We didn't really have any common features. We had different skin, hair, eyes, and we were all from different parts of the U.S. A couple of them were Canadian, and there was this one guy from the Philippines. It was pretty clear who the event organizer was, though. A chipper young woman in a black pantsuit with a company logo pin and a digital clipboard. She went around the room confirming that everyone was a member of the Blue Hill. I overheard an older woman mentioning she was categorized as over 30%, while a young man mentioned he only had 5%. The young woman cleared her throat and excused herself, calmly demanding the attention of the room.
Thank you all so much for coming.
She smiled.
I'm sure you have 100 questions, and we thought this might be a good time to get to know one another a little better. Please follow me.
We were led through a corridor to a smaller open room, a sort of meeting space in the back. They'd turned down the lights a bit and set out a couple of platters of cheeses, crackers, and some alcohol-free sparkling wine. There were a couple of people there already. I was about to spark up a conversation with a 50-year-old man who looked as confused as me when the chipper young woman took hold of the room again. She directed our attention to a man that I can't for the life of me remember the name of. Weston or Wesley, I think. He in turn welcomed us and encouraged us to indulge in the various snacks scattered throughout the room. Then he introduced us to the topic of the evening, the Blue Hill tribe.
If there is one thing I'm certain of,
He started.
it is that every single person in this room has had a serious medical condition at some point in their life. Something unusual. Does anyone mind sharing an example?
I didn't speak up about the severe ulcers I had as a kid and the partial transplant I had to get. But there were others who openly shared various issues. Heart valve issues, cornea transplants, nerve damage. Everyone seemed to have something. The man just nodded, as if expecting this.
This is sadly a common attribute of people with lineage dating back to the Blue Hill tribes. So let's take a closer look at the history and customs of these unique people. And while we do, please feel free to mark yourself in the attendance sheet.
He continued to speak of a group of people native to the northern Scandinavian mountain ranges. There were dates, locations, an approximate number of tribal members, and a few other sparse details. I marked the form while I waited, realizing pretty early on that what he was saying was suspiciously generic. He spoke of leather and bone craftsmanship, and a belief in mountain spirits, but there were no details, no references, no pictures, drawings, or artifacts. I noticed a lot of people around the room paying close attention and not really thinking too much about what they were filling out on the attendance sheet. But I took a closer look. Our names were already on the sheet, so we were only supposed to make a check mark. However, there were also percentages printed on the side, corresponding to the percentage of heritage we had in common with this tribe. I recognized my 11% and the 30% of the old woman. There was also a series of other numbers that I didn't immediately recognize. When I thought no one was looking, I snapped a picture of it just in case. After a 15-minute lecture on the history of the Blue Hill tribe, I came to the realization that I hadn't actually learned anything. The locations and dates were so generic that there was no way to fact-check it, and there were no details as to their various customs and crafts. Looking around the room, I noticed the chipper young woman was off in the corner, whispering to someone on her Bluetooth earpiece, her eyes scanning the crowd with a serious demeanor. There was a man in a suit by the doorway taking pictures with his phone, and a hotel functionary offering refreshments being turned away. This was clearly a private matter, and of great interest to the company, for some reason. I snapped to attention as the room applauded. The lecture came to an end, and we were given some time to mingle, but not without another reminder to make a mark on the attendance sheet. I chatted a bit with a few people, but it all felt a bit forced. Just a few words here and there. I got the impression that none of us had very much in common. No one seemed to have any idea where that part of their heritage actually came from. There was this one guy who had studied his genealogy extensively, who insisted that it was strictly impossible for him to be even partly Scandinavian.
I've mapped out every family member for 6 generations.
He scoffed.
There's no way.
As more and more people filtered out into the night, I decided to lag a bit to see what was being said behind closed doors. I wasn't sneaking around on all fours like a spy, just lingering a little too long on the other side of a bathroom door or stopping to conveniently check my email near a hushed discussion. I picked up a few bits and pieces, discussions about our percentages, for example. There was also talk about a second event the following night, and how it wasn't officially on the schedule. They referred to it as a sort of closing ceremony. There was also a short talk about inviting a few of us to a private meeting. I heard 2 people squabbling a bit about the details, and I didn't catch much of it, but I clearly heard a sentence as they finished. Just get the right ones, one of them snarled.
None of that 3% shit.
I didn't like that, not one bit. Returning to my room, I decided to pack up my things. I had a bad feeling about whatever they were up to, and I couldn't help but to imagine that they had something planned. Maybe it was all a scam after all, or something worse. Either way, I wasn't eager to find out. I couldn't find a reasonably priced flight back home until early morning. It was almost 12 hours away, but I figured I could pull an all-nighter and get out as soon as the sun rose. I could wait a few hours at the airport if need be. With my bags packed and ready, I settled in for a long night. It was somewhere around 2 a.m. when I found myself staring at late-night TV and scrolling on my phone. As a salesman prattled on in the background, a stray thought hit me. I decided to take another look at the attendance sheet photo. There was a set of numbers by each person that didn't make immediate sense to me. I brought out a pen and paper and started breaking them down. First in sets of 2, then individually, then sets of 3, trying to find some pattern or idea. It took me a little longer than I cared to admit to recognize something. The last 4 numbers correlated to one pattern. floor and room number. That left 4 other numbers, which, when broken down into pairs of 2, correlated to a month and day. The date itself didn't make much sense, though. For me, it was a few days after I'd sent in my first sample. Then it hit me. It was probably the day they received the sample. Taking a closer look at the percentages, I could see that everyone with a 9% heritage or lower were situated on lower floors, while those with 10% and higher all seemed to have the higher. Maybe there was a sort of unspoken threshold happening at 10% and up. Could that be what they referred to when they said to get the ripe ones? As I scrolled through various images from previously hosted charity events, I got a notification. My phone warned me that my camera app had unexpectedly closed. Strange, seeing as how it wasn't open to begin with. A bad feeling settled in my stomach. I was on the hotel Wi-Fi. Could they be monitoring our activities? I considered the option that I was just being tired and paranoid. That might very well be the case, but on the other hand, I'd heard what I'd heard. It was stressing me out, further upsetting my already sensitive stomach. I could feel a tinge of pain and decided to go get some ice. Might sound like a stupid home remedy thing, but sucking on an ice cube has always helped me calm down. I followed the corridor, got myself some ice in a bucket, and returned to my room. As I was about to round the corner, I recognized a familiar sound. My hotel room door being closed and locked from the outside. Peeking around the corner, I noticed 2 people dressed in black disappearing down the hall, mumbling quietly to one another. Returning to my room, I couldn't help but to second-guess myself. Had the bathroom door always been open? Was the same channel on the TV playing? Had someone moved my bags? It was hard to tell. That's how I spent the night, wondering. My heart sometimes skipped a beat as I thought I noticed something new, but ultimately, I couldn't find anything immediately threatening. I pulled out my phone battery just in case and kept it in my other pocket. No one would be tracking me anytime soon. I messed up my bed to make it look like I had slept in it, even though I spent most of my time in the bathroom, ready to lock the door and call the police. I nodded off a few times, but eventually, the sun broke the horizon. A few rays of sunshine slipping in through the frosted bathroom window. I got my bags and left. One nervous elevator ride later, I slapped down the hotel key on the reception and headed for the exit without elaborating. I accidentally made eye contact with the hotel security guard by the exit, who gave me a curious side eye.
Sir?
He asked. I stopped briefly and excused myself. He held up a hand.
Sir, may I speak with you?
He repeated. I have an appointment, I smiled. Sorry.
It won't take long.
He smiled.
Right this way.
Looking at the silver-colored revolving door that could get me out of there, I considered my options. I could make a break for it, or I could just see what this was about. I decided to just talk to the man, banking hard on it not being anything serious. In hindsight, I should have gone for the goddamn door. I was taken to a small room right next to the reception. There, he asked to see my phone. I showed him, although the battery was still out.
My supervisor had a couple of questions.
He said.
She's just outside. Won't be a minute.
I'm sorry, but I gotta... He pocketed my phone, smiled, and stepped out of the room. But it wasn't an ordinary service personnel kind of smile. It was almost apologetic. Like he knew he'd landed me in some kind of trouble. And through the door came the chipper young woman from the previous night. She wasn't as chipper this time. She didn't sit down, instead opting to stand on the opposite side of the room with her arms crossed. For a solid minute, she just stood there, considering what to say. Finally, she let out a sigh and took a step forward. I felt like a scorned schoolboy, being dragged to the principal's office.
Are you leaving early?
She asked.
Would be a shame to miss the get-together tonight.
I'm thankful to have been a part of this, I said, but I really ought to get going.
Oh?
She feigned surprise.
Family emergency?
That's private, I said. I could still hear hotel personnel outside and figured she didn't want to make a scene. I leaned back in my chair, confident and quiet. She didn't take that too well.
I think it'd be for the best if you stayed a little longer.
She continued. I don't think I will.
I don't think there's much to debate.
I'm sorry, but you have no... She slammed her fist on the table and stared me down, unblinking and furious. There was a slight tremble in her movement. There was no way those outside didn't hear us, and yet no one moved a muscle. Perhaps she was in more control than I'd anticipated.
I think you're gonna stick around for a while.
She snarled.
Or we're gonna have a problem. You wanna have a problem with me?
No, I said, shaking my head. I don't.
Then you're gonna shut the fuck up and play along.
I was dumbstruck. There was no ambiguity here. She was outright threatening me. I could barely understand why. Maybe she'd seen something on my phone while I was connected to the hotel Wi-Fi. Or maybe they'd noticed me spying. Perhaps they saw me pondering the attendance sheet, I don't know. Either way, they weren't taking any chances. I didn't see that hotel security guard again. Instead, they put me in a room with a very quiet man in a suit. He didn't answer any questions, and he wasn't much for small talk. All he did was stand outside the room, checking in on me as soon as I made a noise. I spent all day in that room, this small 10 by 14 feet room with little more than a couch, a coffee table, and the most generic-looking hotel painting I'd ever seen. Still, as calming as that room was, I was freaking the fuck out. But there was nothing for me to do at that point. No harebrained schemes could make me magically phase through the wall. I was stuck there, and I sure as hell wouldn't fight that guy. Didn't take a detective to spot that he was armed. The stress made my stomach act up. I was allowed to use the bathroom, but they kept the stall door open. Then it was straight back the room. I tried frantically to come up with some kind of plan, or figuring out some specific turn of the corridor where he wouldn't have a clear shot, but it was useless. There were long, wide open spaces and no harsh corners. But that was my mindset. I was still under the impression that there was something I could do, but in reality, I couldn't. Once that started to dawn on me, I realized how screwed I was. It was the emotional equivalent of sinking into a deep black ocean. It was late afternoon when the door opened. Having spent most of the day napping on the couch and anxiously wandering back and forth, I got on my feet like a soldier. One of the guards coaxed me outside. I could tell something was up. People were rushing past us, speaking into their earpieces. We moved in the opposite direction, but I caught a glimpse of a well-dressed group of people used as human shields for someone very important. I was quickly ushered along. I was taken through the hotel kitchen. They'd cleared out the staff. They took me to what looked like an abandoned old walk-in freezer. I was pushed inside and the door was closed. I don't know how those walk-in freezers are supposed to work, but this one locked from the outside. There were no lights, and I could barely make out what was happening through the little windows. I didn't have to wait for long. Just minutes later, I could hear other people entering the room. Some curious, some angry, some crying. One by one, the guests from the previous night were ushered into the freezer. Even the old woman. Well, not all the guests. Only those ripe enough. There were 9 of us in total. Some were mildly annoyed, others were confused. Finally, they dropped a guy who had been beaten straight onto the floor. He was clearly not okay, trying his best to breathe through his mouth. That set most of us off. Some banged on the door, others screamed at the top of their lungs. No one had a phone or a weapon. The panic rose and it spread like wildfire. Soon I was right there with them, screaming for someone to let us out. I screamed, my voice hoarse, but no one came. We must have been in there for at least 40 to 45 minutes. Our protest died, and in the following silence, we heard someone enter the room. A single set of footsteps. They approached, and we all quieted down. I could see the vague outline of a man outside, but our breaths had fogged up the windows on the door. He had a black suit with a blue tie. He stood there with his hands in his pockets, watching us. I backed away from the door, and others did the same. No matter how bad the freezer was, there was something telling me that this guy was somehow worse. He was too calm, like this was all normal. He'd done it before. As the door opened, we all scrambled to get back. He stepped into the entrance, obscured by the bad lighting. But for all I could see, he was a man. A little shorter than me, a bit round around the stomach, bald, maybe glasses. There was something reflecting off his face. And yet, there was something about him that screamed danger. The man who'd been beaten was ready to roll the dice. He took off running, trying to push past and get out. There was a kitchen exit not too far away. So if he could just make it past this guy, then maybe he'd be in the clear. But no, he didn't get far. The strange man didn't tackle him or attack or scream. In fact, he didn't seem to react at all. But the runner, well, he stopped a few steps short of leaving the freezer. He clutched his throat, gasping for air. The strange man spoke in a raspy, matter-of-factly voice, as if counting the inventory on a supermarket shelf.
Male, 38 years old, 6-year spread reaching a total of 18%, implant through esophagus surgery.
And then there was this ungodly noise. The runner collapsed to his knees. He was trying to scream, but all that came out was a sort of guttural wheeze. It escaped him in waves, involuntarily, until we could see something poking out of his mouth, like the silhouette of a wet branch being pulled out. Finally, there was a snap, as it fully dislodged, and the freezer began to reek of blood. He stopped moving. The panic consumed us. I may read calm here in the aftermath, but in that moment, I was an animal. I was scratching on the fucking walls, trying to get back. I didn't care if I was pushing people to the floor or stepping on someone's head. I was desperate. The strange man spoke again, but this time, his raspy voice seemed better, improved.
Female, 29 years old, 4-year spread reaching a total of 14%, implant through spinal surgery.
One by one, he counted us off. Male, female, male, female. 4 years, 5 years, 9, 8. Percentages going up and down. Lung cancer, cornea transplant, dialysis, screams and blood. One by one, being pulled out of the crowd and then pulled apart. I'll never forget the sounds. Small bones sound like carrots when they snap. Bigger ones, and different. The dripping noise as human spillage mixed on the floor. Drops of blood really do sound heavier than water. And with every victim, I could see something shift in our captor. Straight back, deeper breaths, like he was absorbing it all into himself. Taking something back. Harvesting. The 6th person on the chopping block was me. He read it all out loud.
Male,
He began.
31 years old, 24-year spread reaching a total of 11%, implant through ulcer treatment.
My stomach rumbled, moved, twitched, as if coming alive. It wanted to escape me, to break free. It strained against me. I collapsed to the floor, my hands slipping on the blood, seeping into my skin, itching under my fingernails. Then, I felt something move in my pocket. I almost dropped it. I still had my phone battery. I took it out and held it up to my mouth. I could bite down on it, drenching myself in acid or God knows what. My stomach ceased moving, if only for a short reprieve. I looked up at my captor. See this? I said. It'll fuck us both up. But you need it, right? You need me whole? There was no response. I could just see him tilting his head down at me. Yeah, if I destroy myself, you get nothing, right? That's it, isn't it, huh? I placed it between my teeth, ready to bite down like a rabid dog on a juicy bone. He didn't move as I got up. We circled one another. He wasn't about to let me go. He wasn't looking me in the eyes. He was staring intently at my stomach. He wanted to pull it out of me, to turn it into something else. Or maybe it was part of him all along, something coming home.
No,
He said.
it ends.
He reached out a hand for me, and I bit down without hesitation. To my surprise, there was just a little puff. But that was it. The battery tumbled to the floor, useless. The man instinctively recoiled, but upon seeing that there was no danger, it all came back with a vengeance. The pain was immediate and incredible. Something in me moved, and I immediately spat up a small glob of stomach acid. Then, the battery exploded. It wasn't a big explosion, just a loud bang. Like the starting pistol of a race. I slipped and slid my way out of the freezer, and had to make a split-second decision. I could close and lock the door behind me, effectively sealing him and everyone in there, or I could leave the door open for others to escape. But it wasn't really a choice. Not really. It never is when you get pushed into something like this. I slammed that door shut and let it auto-lock without even thinking about it. Perhaps he'd asked the guards to clear out, I don't know. But there was no one else in that kitchen. I grabbed a knife from one of the counters, burst through the exit door, and disappeared into the night. My stomach stirring like a restless animal, but settling as I got further away. I can only regret what happened to those left behind. It still makes my fucking spine itch. A police patrol found me wandering the streets about an hour or two later. I can't imagine it looked good. I was taking such small, shallow breaths, and I was still clutching a kitchen knife. Not to mention, I was covered in blood. They were convinced that I'd killed someone, but I surrendered willingly and eagerly. I tried to tell a coherent story, but they just didn't understand me. I probably didn't make much sense. A shower and a fresh set of clothes later, I explained my experience at the hotel to the best of my ability. Sadly, it didn't really do much. There were no records of the man I'd described ever visiting that hotel. As for the missing people, those I claimed had been murdered. They had checked out one by one at different hours the day prior, according to hotel records. They might be missing, but there was no indication of foul play. Yeah, I'm calling bullshit on that. So yeah, that was by far the worst time of my life. Looking back at it, it feels unreal, like it happened to someone else. But even now, I can still get little flashes of something that reminds me of that night, and it just pulls me right back. It never really leaves. Whoever that man was, he was important enough to get a whole company to cover for him. I'm sure not all of them knew why they were doing it, but they were complacent. I think we're looking at someone with a lot of resources and a lot of reach. I never got a name, and seeing as how he seemed to change with every victim he consumed, I can't really tell what he looks like anymore. Not even his age or length or weight. There are, surprisingly, some real records about a small tribe of people from the Blue Hill in the Scandinavian mountain range. There isn't much out there about them, just a mention that they worshipped immortal mountain spirits. Others say they worshipped devils. It's a mixed bag. I don't know what to believe. I don't know what I saw, but I am living with the knowledge that a part of me, something inside me, isn't my own. It moves with me. It lives within me. But at the snap of a finger from that thing, and it will rebel. It will fail me. And I'm just at, 11%? What happens when I reach 50? Nuru? I decided to post this today after getting a video ad that I could never have anticipated. It seems that this company is still in business, advertising their new generation of DNA tests. I'm sure some of you out there have seen it. 20 seconds, unskippable. Smiling faces, distant families being tied together by CGI blue ribbon. I think they have some of those damn sunflowers in the background, still colored that basic company blue.